I'm very happy and proud to be here at our kickoff presentation of our special series, Unpacking Silver City. Before I get too far, I just have a minute or two of comments, but I'd like to give some thank you to the village. That, it takes a village to put this together. Thank you to the speakers for participating, and also thank you to the New Mexico Humanities Council, which has underwritten some of the costs of presenting this program. And thank you to the Western Institute for Lifelong Learning, our new partner in presenting and promoting these programs. The Silver City Museum Society, a nonprofit friends group who raises money for the museums, also contributed to making this happen. And last but not least, the museum staff, particularly Aaron Griffith, who crossed all the T's and dotted the I's to make sure this program goes off without a hitch, and to Joe Lutz, who's promoted the program. This series, Unpacking Silver City, is a project that's part of the development of a comprehensive exhibit about this region. We're calling this new exhibit, or new to be exhibit, Silver City 101. And we've heard from our community that the museum needs to present an overview of the region's past. There's no one place where you can go right now to see an overview. This series and the ultimate exhibit we'll put together will present that. This overview will be an introduction to tourists and a framework for Grant County citizens to explore the many faceted stories from our past. So thank you all for joining us, which is, this program by Dr. Dinwiddie is sure to be informative, but please stick around for the conversation that will follow, because we need your input to shape this Silver City 101 project. One of my professional heroes is a museum leader from the last century by the name of John Cotton Dana. And Dana called upon museums to be fundamentally useful to their communities, not simply a storehouse of old things. He called the museum field to find what your community needs and then fit the museum to serve those needs. So that's what we hope to be doing with these projects, but we need your curiosity and your questioning and your suggestions to make sure Silver City 101 is in real service to our community. Just a bit, history, which is what we do at the museum, is an odd pursuit. I mean, Henry Ford famously said, "It's bunk, forget about it." The philosopher Santayana said, if you don't know it, you're bound to repeat it. And American grade school textbooks for years have used history to promote the idea that America is the purest and best country that was ever invented. History's been used for a lot of things. Well, we at the Silver City Museum know that our collection of objects and the programs and exhibits they inform are not simply nostalgic pursuits. It's an important pursuit because it provides our community with three things. Grant County's history is something that makes us proud. The accomplishments of our ancestors who, to steal a phrase, built it to last. Two, our region's history provides knowledge about various aspects of our life, like hopefully this series will do, makes us aware of causes and effects in the environment and government, cultural identity sustaining, just to name a few. And third, maybe most importantly, it provides us the tools to make things better, to not repeat the mistakes of the past, to revisit the major accomplishments from the past. Well, history is a noble and intelligent pursuit of knowing, of understanding, and using it to take steps to improve our lives. Well, thank you all for joining in this particular pursuit of our past.
And I just want to thank everybody for joining us here today. It looks like we have a good crowd. We also have plenty of people watching along with us on Facebook Live, and I'm very happy about that. So before we get started, I want to thank everybody who went into putting this all together. first and foremost, of course, our director, Bart Roselli, who helped conceive of all of this and really was a driving force, as well as Joe Lutz, without whom you would not be here or know that you should be here. The whole staff, our store manager, Melody, you'll be hearing a little bit from later. She has a little store set up here. We're giving you some information on that. And upcoming, we will have Dr. Dinwiddie, of course. And then afterwards, we will have Commissioner Harry Brown and State Representative Louise Terrazas. So you don't want to miss that. Stick around. Speaking of our partnership at Will, let's see if Alan Reagans has something that he would like to say.
Sure, just really quickly, Erin, because I want to get to our program here. The Western Institute for Lifelong Learning, most of you are familiar with, some of you are members of, is an organization here in Silver City based at the Western New Mexico University. And we basically are promoting learning in community, and that involves a lot of interesting things, including our partnership with the museum, which my suspicion is we've partnered with the museum for all of our 16 years, but we've formalized that this year and doing even more great things, including this program this summer, which really is to the credit of the museum. As someone who's not a long-term, born and bred Silver Cityan, I see this as a great chance to get a crash course in the history and culture of Silver City and hear from the community through the conversations that'll go on in addition to the expert presentations. So I'm really excited about this. If you want to get more information on Will, please go to our website. It does have links to register for the rest of the programs, as does the museum website, and information on how to join, how to be a member, and the various courses and programs that we're involved with. So again, with that, I turn it back over to you, Erin, and really looking forward to the program.
As am I, Alan. Thank you very much. And so I will keep you, and I will keep you no longer from the greatness, from the research, from the depth of knowledge that is unbelievable, in that he's like a database of his own. I was on the radio with him the other day, and he carries books, like he may want to refer to them, but he doesn't need to. He just can pull off dates and everything. It's amazing. It's impressive. But more importantly, it is well done, thorough, meaningful, and entertaining. Dr. Doug Dinwiddie.
Thank you very much, Erin. I hope I can do something here to earn some of that praise. I want to just start by saying that I'm kind of a local kid. I grew up in this area in Pinos Altos, became fascinated with all aspects of history except things local. And it wasn't until I got older that I began to appreciate the depth and fascination of the local Grant County history area. And I'm glad that in my more mature years, I've had a chance to further explore that. I want to also just say it's an honor to be included in this group. The other presenters in this group are all very accomplished scholars, and I'm happy to have several of them here in the room with me today. And it's a privilege to be part of this group. My goal today is to provide a kind of a general framework for the development of Silver City and Grant County, at least politically. Many aspects of our history here will be described in great depth by the future presenters in this series. So if we can just go right to the slides, we'll take a quick look at some maps that would give us a little bit of an idea about the first political setup for the area that we now know as the Grant County area. So if we can bring up that first map, Erin. And one more slide, it'll be a bigger version of that. Okay, I'm sorry, back one. Okay, basically political North America in 1800. You see the orange indicated in the lower left of the map New Spain. And of course, this region was part of that area that was claimed by Spain beginning in the mid 1500s. So those are the earliest political descriptions of the region, at least in cartography. If we look at the basic eras of rule in the area, of course, we begin as part of the Spanish Empire, but in 1821, Mexico will win its independence from Spain. So we can go to the next slide and take a look at the map there. And this was the nation of Mexico as it was perceived by them between 1821 and 1846. The black arrow that appears on this slide points at the approximate location of Silver City and Grant County. So you'll see we are almost in the middle of the nation of Mexico as it was defined by that country up until its war with the United States. Actually, of course, the United States had been born on the East Coast from British colonies back in the 1770s. And immediately from the time it won its independence, formed its own government, the United States was an expansionist country that was pushing westward. And it was inevitable that the American nation was going to eventually have its eyes on territory that was claimed by Mexico. So we can move on to another slide here, and we'll see that when war finally comes between the United States and Mexico, it's going to break out in 1846. The background to that was land disputes, particularly in Texas, that had led to both countries claiming Texas. And President Polk of the United States in the 1840s had tried to buy considerable territory from Mexico for westward expansion. But Mexico had rebuffed those approaches. And so Polk decided essentially to provoke a war with Mexico in the mid 1840s. And he was able to do that on the Texas border in South Texas. And as part of the American strategy to defeat Mexico once war was engaged, there were several American armies that invaded Mexican territory. And the one that is of most concern to us is the invasion that started down the Santa Fe Trail in 1846. Now, the Santa Fe Trail had been established between Mexico's Santa Fe and the United States state of Missouri in the 1820s. And the Santa Fe Trail was a major commerce route. And the United States is going to use that Santa Fe Trail to invade New Mexico in 1846. Stephen Watts Kearny's army was known as the Army of the West. And they swept aside very meager Mexican resistance. They captured Santa Fe basically without a shot in August of 1846. Kearny issued a proclamation to the people of New Mexico saying that they were now under the rule of the United States. He assured them that their religion and their personal property would be respected, but he also warned them that any attempt at revolt or rebellion would be put down in the harshest terms. Once Kearny was satisfied that New Mexico in the north was under control, he could now move westward to complete the other part of his mission, which was to assist the overthrow of Mexican rule in California. So obviously he has to get from New Mexico to California. And he divides his army he brings part of the army down the Rio Grande in the early autumn of 1846. He happens to run into the famous scout Kit Carson near Socorro. And Carson was actually carrying an important message back to Washington from John C. Fremont out in California. But Kearny interrupted Carson's mission and said, no, you're going to go with me back to California. I need a guide to California. Now, Kit Carson had actually been in this part of the world around here. The copper mines had been operated by Americans starting in the 1820s. Of course, there had been copper mining at Santa Rita since at least 1803. But Americans had partnered in the operation there in the 1820s. Carson had worked briefly at the mines, and so he knew this area very well. And he had, under orders from Kearny, he agreed to lead the American Army through this area on its way to California. And they visit the copper mines. We can go to the next slide. One of the officers in Kearny's army was a topographical engineer, Lieutenant William H. Emery. And Emery will file an official report later on in which he gives a day-by-day account of what they see as they're moving westward through the area. And I've got a quote here from Emery, referring to the little valley here where the San Vicente Spring was located, and where, of course, eventually Silver City will be located. You can see, he says, the country passed over was beautiful in the extreme, high rolling hills with mountains in the distance. So part of Emery's job, by the way, was to keep track of the potential resources in the area that could be developed. And so he took note of the mineralization in the area. Of course, he referred to the copper mines, but also talked about the many other minerals that could be exploited in future days. We can go on. If we look, well, I'll just point out a couple of different important things here. You notice that the U.S. will actually militarily occupy New Mexico for 4 years until 1850. In 1850, Congress gets around to finally ratifying the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which had ended the war with Mexico in 1848. They made modifications to that treaty, but one of the important things that comes out of it is that New Mexico Territory will be created in 1851. And we'll look at a map in a moment there that will show us exactly where that's located. And by the way, the people who signed the treaty just put off placing the boundary. They said, we'll determine the boundary later, and each side will have to appoint commissioners to meet and finalize the actual boundary. So we can look at the next slide. Just a couple of things to point out here, which I'll be going into detail in a minute. Basically, New Mexico territory will be divided in 1863 into Arizona and New Mexico territories. And then we see the creation of Grant County in 1868. So next, if we go to the second slide after this, we have a bigger version of the map. One more. Okay, Mexico has to give up half of its country. The area that is shaded in red or red-orange here to the left side of the map basically shows the territory that was handed over by the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in exchange for $15 million. Now, if you kind of look at the southern edge of that red-orange, that was the original boundary that was decided upon by the Boundary Commission. in 1851 and 52. The Boundary Commission was a political disaster. The guy in charge of it was a man who knew nothing about surveying, John Russell Bartlett. Emory was brought back to help survey the boundary. And Emory was horrified when he found that the boundary that Bartlett had agreed to did not include the area in southern Arizona and southwest New Mexico that was most suitable to the construction of a railroad. So that's why the Gadsden Purchase has to be added in 1853. The United States bargains with Mexico. Actually, the Mexicans were willing to sell a lot more had the US come up with more money, but they settled for the area that is shaded in blue here, the Gadsden Purchase, which takes in a little bit of southern New Mexico, extreme southern New Mexico. Most of the Gadsden Purchase is inside what we today think of as Arizona. And you'll notice that Silver City and most of Grant County was not part of the Gadsden Purchase. We're just a little bit to the north of the Gadsden Purchase. And that had been one good thing that Bartlett did is he made sure that the copper mines were inside the original boundaries. But he screwed up when it came to finding the route for the railroad. So that's why they had to add the Gadsden Purchase in the 1850s. Okay, we can move on. Next slide. Okay, New Mexico Territory created in 1851. As part of the Compromise of 1850, California had immediately been admitted as a state. And there were people in New Mexico that felt like New Mexico should come in as a state at the same time. But there were a lot of reasons why New Mexico statehood was to be put off. And in fact, it'll be put off for 6 decades after this. One of the biggest reasons was the feeling on the part of many in Congress that New Mexico was too backward to include as a state right away. They had a lot of problems with the fact that most of the people living in New Mexico were former Mexican citizens. Very few of them spoke English. The education system was managed by the Catholic Church and on and on. So there were a lot of reasons that New Mexico was denied statehood. So instead it has to settle for territorial status. And so the first territorial legislature that meets in 1852 proceeded to divide the territory, which of course you'll notice here included what is today Arizona and even the southern tip of Nevada in those years. They divided it into 9 counties. And of course, this is pre-Gadsden Purchase. This is a year before the Gadsden Purchase as well. And you'll notice that Doña Ana County, the southernmost of the counties there, takes in what is today Silver City and most of current Grant County. So we can move on. By 1878, of course, by then they have settled the boundary, international boundary, added the Gadsden Purchase and so forth. And the territorial legislature creates Grant County in 1868. This particular map shows what it looks like 10 years afterwards. And of course, you'll notice that Grant County is essentially the whole southwestern corner of New Mexico territory. We can move on. Now, of course, one of the big things that faced the United States was what about the native Indian people who are living in the region that is acquired from Mexico? Mexican policy toward the native people had been a very mixed bag, and there had been a tremendous amount of hostility between the Mexicans and the Native Americans, particularly the Apache people of southwestern New Mexico and southeast Arizona. And so the United States, when it takes over politically from Mexico, is going to have to deal with these indigenous people as well. And by this time, by the 1850s, the United States already had a long history of various policies dealing with native peoples, and they're going to impose those onto the region just acquired from Mexico. We can move on. In particular, the group affected here are going to be the Apache people. We won't, for reasons of time, we won't go into all the different band structures of the Apache people. They were not a homogeneous monolithic group. They were divided into various geographical groups. The ones right here in our local area went by several different names, the Membreño, the Gila, the Copper Mine. The native name for them were the Bedonkohe and the Chihine people. But these are the people who are going to be most dislocated by the coming of the national government of the United States to the region. Next slide, please. These people, of course, are subjected to forced removal to reservations. Beginning in 1872, the US government will establish what is known as the Grant Peace Policy, named for President Grant, who, of course, is also the namesake for our county. Several different reservations were created. Again, there's a history of some of them coming and going, which we won't go into, but the bottom line for the Apache people was that they're going to be forcibly removed, and they're going to be sent to reservations in Arizona, particularly at San Carlos, and also to Mescalero Reservation over near where the town of Ruidoso is located today. And those who refuse to go along with this relocation and forced residence at the reservations, those who refused were to be considered hostile. And so the US Army was given the task of rounding those people up, forcing them to go to the reservations, making war on them if they did not. The Apaches retaliated by severe raiding against American settlements. And the history of our local area is replete with the bloodshed that took place between the Apache and the white settlers and white soldiers. Next slide, please. As part of the effort by the Army to deal with the Apaches, the fort that we know as Fort Baird was established in 1866. It's located roughly 7 miles to the east of Silver City, and it predates Silver City by 4 years and predates Grant County by 2. Fort Baird established in 1866, by the way, not the first fort in the area. There were several that came and went. For most of them didn't stay for various reasons, but Fort Baird is the one that will be the permanent post. And get started in 1866, and during the height of its involvement in the Apache Wars and the Victoria War of 1880, there will be over 800 soldiers stationed at Fort Baird. Most of the time it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 to 300. But Fort Baird remains one of the most visible parts of the national government in this area. It stays as an active military post until 1899. And when the Army made the decision they no longer needed an active fort there, in 1899, it was converted to the first US Army tuberculosis hospital. And it remained in that capacity until 1920. Then it was turned over to the U.S. Health Service, who then turned it over once more to the U.S. Veterans Administration. It operated as a veterans hospital until 1964, at which time it was sold to the state of New Mexico. And the state still owns the property today that Fort Baird occupied. Next slide, please. Now, Silver City, of course, had come into being in 1870 and was very rapidly growing. It was the most populous town in Grant County by 1871. And the citizens of Silver City were very progressive and were anxious to get their town officially recognized. And the first survey for Silver City was done in 1872. I'm looking at Susan Berry. I think that's correct, that the first town survey was done, but it takes a while for all of those surveys to become official. But the point is, Silver City was now born and is soon the most populated place in Grant County based on the mining of the early silver discoveries here. And it was also rapidly becoming kind of the economic hub of this whole part of the territory of New Mexico. Next slide, please. The area was very anxious. The citizens very anxious for Santa Fe to recognize the importance of this area to the territory of New Mexico. Unfortunately, this coincides with the time when Santa Fe and territorial politics were under the sway of a group of newly arrived lawyers who had come to New Mexico to make their fortune and were busy doing so. Next slide, please. This is a group that comes to be known as the Santa Fe Ring, and the two most prominent members of the Santa Fe Ring were Thomas B. Catron and Stephen Elkins. But it actually was a lot more than just those two. Their tentacles spread out to every corner of the territory. And Silver City, in spite of what its prominent citizens wanted to happen, was not high on the agenda for the Santa Fe Ring. The thing that had made them particularly infamous was their manipulation of the Spanish land grants and Mexican land grants in northern New Mexico, and getting control in those parts of the territory where the grants were prevalent, and there were no such grants in this part of the territory. And so as a result, Silver City kind of had to take a back seat for the concerns of the other parts of the territory. And the legislature in particular was especially divided and corrupt in these early years of the 1870s. Next slide, please. So what are we going to do about it? And the citizens of Grant County, according to local newspapers, the Grant County Herald being one of them, decided that they had had enough, that Santa Fe was going to pay attention, by gosh, or else. And so what's the else? Well, secession. New Mexico is going to, or excuse me, Grant County is going to leave the territory of New Mexico and join Arizona if these citizens in Grant County have their way. And we'll notice that there is a local meeting which is held in October of 1876. And by the way, 1876, of course, is the centennial of the Declaration of Independence. And there seems to be a lot of thought in that direction from the citizens in Silver City. Said, well, you know, 100 years ago, our forefathers were breaking away from a government that would ignore their needs. And so by golly, what better way to celebrate the centennial than to separate ourselves from a government that doesn't give us any needed attention. So the murmurings of secession became a roar in October of 1876. And a convention was called at a local hall in Silver City. And according to the paper, all of the men of import in Silver City attended this meeting, and they agreed to 3 resolutions. And the most important of them was that they would separate from the territory of New Mexico and attach themselves to the territory of Arizona. And they said, why are we doing this? One is there's no redress of our grievances coming forth from Santa Fe. And in fact, we're treated as, quoting them here, we are treated as an appendage of the body politic. Okay. And there was also a racially charged observation as part of that, in that those who approved this resolution said that it would be much better for the county if they could join under a government that where legislation was done by Americans, in quotes. The people of the New Mexico legislature, obviously referring to the Hispanic people there, was said that they had a curious nature which prevented them from being able to properly govern themselves. And so there's that element of this as well. There were 62 prominent citizens who signed off on these resolutions. And the secession movement seemed to be well underway, and it was being generally received quite well in Arizona, by the way. Arizona would be happy to get one of the most prosperous counties in New Mexico added to Arizona. It was also argued, by the way, that Arizona was much friendlier to the mining industry, and that it was a territory that understood the importance of mining as opposed to New Mexico. Well, what happens? As we all know, we're not part of Arizona. Well, what happened was that the resolution eventually found its way to the National Congress, and it was referred to a committee at the National Congress, the Committee on Territories. And as every political scientist knows, committees are where most ideas go to die. And that particular proposal died in committee in the National Congress. But in the meantime, Santa Fe apparently started to begin listening better. We can go to the next slide. In 1878, Governor William Axtell, who soon would be sidelined due to events in Lincoln County, Governor William Axtell will sign legislation approving the charter for the town of Silver City. And this mollified the rebellious Grant Countians, that they finally were now going to be able to do much more self-government than they felt they had ever been able to do before. And of course, the Silver City Charter is unique. There had actually been one other legislatively approved incorporation in New Mexico of a community, and that was the little community of Elizabethtown up in Colfax County, near the Colorado border. But Elizabethtown doesn't last. It was a little boom town that came and went. And Grant County then is going to have the honor of having its county seat, Silver City, become the only territorially recognized incorporated community. And there's a lot of things that make the charter for Silver City important and unique. One of the most important things is that the charter allowed the town to levy and collect taxes and to seize and sell property in order to collect delinquent taxes. And the money raised from this finally settles the public schools issue, which had been boiling in Silver City since its founding. And so Silver City gets the first locally funded public school in the territory as well. And in fact, as most of us know, I think Silver City is still governed under the terms of the charter. Sort of. There are things that have boiled up in recent years that kind of throw a little of that into question, like when do you have your elections and that sort of thing. But it's significant enough, of course, that Silver City celebrates the charter every year now. We can go to the next slide. And we have a annual. Yeah, we can go on one more slide. Yeah, and we have an annual party to celebrate the charter. And many of the people here have participated in that to one degree or another. And so it's one of those aspects of government that Silver City can be very proud of is its charter. I wanted to just quote something from the charter for us too that I found interesting. It's in section 11 of the charter. It says, the council shall have the power to prevent and punish for the firing of firearms, the galloping or furious driving of horses and mules, fighting, quarreling, Sabbath breaking, drunkenness, indecent and profane language, and all offenses against public decency and good order within the corporate limits of the town. Today, council members are challenged by the flying of certain politically motivated flags that might seem to be in violation of this section of the charter. Now, of course, our government operates under a system that political scientists refer to as federalism. And federalism is a term which basically means the division of powers among levels of government. We have a national government, we have state governments, we have county and municipal governments, and they all share powers and have different responsibilities. And so when we talk about the influence of government on people's lives, we have to keep in mind that we're talking about many different levels of government. And certainly if we think just in terms of the national government, which rightly or wrongly most of us refer to as the federal government, the feds, but when we say the feds, we're really talking about the national government. And we've already mentioned one aspect of the national government that has greatly influenced the lives of people of this part of New Mexico. And that was Fort Baird, and what happened with Fort Baird over the years being a military post and a hospital. But there are other aspects of the federal government that show up too. And the U.S. Forest Service, for example, the creation of the Gila Forest Reserve, which was established in March of 1899 by the General Land Office. And it was renamed the Gila Forest Reserve in 1905. And the next year it was transferred to the newly created U.S. Forest Service and officially became the Gila National Forest in March of 1907. And of course, we all know that's a big part of our local economy and our local resources today is the presence of the Gila National Forest. The growing conservation movement that produced the federal management programs such as the National Forest System also led to national legislation that had effects in Grant County. For example, the Antiquities Act of 1906 helped to protect historic and archaeological sites such as the Gila cliff dwellings located in our region. While the massive presence of the national government in people's lives was not yet evident, the pre-statehood years nevertheless were impacted by laws that were made at the national level. In 1862, the Homestead Act had allowed for 160 acres to be public land to be claimed by individuals willing to settle on it and live on it for 5 years. General mining law was brought in 1872, which greatly affected the extraction of minerals. And by the way, the statistics show that for the entire territory of New Mexico, over 25% of New Mexico's territory was eventually proved up under the Homestead Act. And of course, we've also referred to the Indian policy, which had so much to do with the lives of the Native Americans. We can move to the next slide, please. The long wait for statehood, could we advance the slide, please? The long wait, thank you. The long wait for statehood, this is, by the way, the US map in 1911, 1 year before New Mexico and Arizona are added. And you'll see the familiar layout there, but look who's not part of the Union yet in 1911. So New Mexico will become number 47, Arizona will become number 48. But oh, what a struggle it was. And we can go to the next slide. One of the reasons that New Mexico struggled for so long to be recognized as a state was powerful opposition in Congress. And this guy here, Albert Beveridge of Indiana, was one of the main enemies of New Mexico's statehood. He gave what would today be considered very racist speeches on the floor of Congress, objecting to bringing New Mexico into the Union because of its, in so many words, he said, the admission of New Mexico would pollute the nation. But fortunately, New Mexico had friends as well in the quest for statehood. So if we go to the next slide, please. And the most important friend to statehood for New Mexico was Theodore Roosevelt. And let's go right to the next slide. In 1898, Roosevelt, of course, forms the first volunteer cavalry, which will become known as the Rough Riders. More Rough Riders came from New Mexico territory than from anywhere else. And Grant County had a significant contingent of Rough Riders. And this is a photograph that is held by the Silver City Museum that shows the men of the Rough Riders who are joining from Grant County. They're about to get on to a passenger car here, which will transport them to Santa Fe to be sworn into national service. And they will be part of Theodore Roosevelt's famous Rough Rider group, which he will take to Cuba and win national fame and glory and help ride that right on into the White House. And so New Mexico has a strong friend in office finally for statehood. And Roosevelt was able to twist a lot of arms and get more people lined up for statehood for New Mexico, although it doesn't happen under his term. It's going to happen under his successor's term. Next slide, please. Let's move on from there. And we've talked about that. We'll go on again. And let's go one more slide. Okay, this is a, let's back up to the cartoon, one back, thank you. This is an outsider's take on New Mexico's quest for statehood. It's an interesting political cartoon. Shows Lady Liberty is going to finally hand over the dress for statehood to New Mexico. And you see that New Mexico is in the native costume, and Lady Liberty is gesturing to the dress that, okay, New Mexico is going to have to change its appearance a little bit, but then you can finally be part of the club, okay, is kind of the message the cartoonist is sending here. So next slide. President Taft will sign the New Mexico statehood bill on January 6th, 1912. And that's going to bring to fruition the long process of gaining statehood. But I want to just quote one thing. One of the things that was required by Congress was that a constitution had to be written for the state, which would then be approved by Congress prior to admission. And this was done. But there's one very interesting section of the New Mexico State Constitution that I just want to call your attention to. It's under the Bill of Rights section of the state. It's Article 2, Section 5, and I'm quoting it exactly here. The rights, privileges, and immunities, civil, political, and religious, guaranteed to the people of New Mexico by the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, shall be preserved inviolate. This is unique among state constitutions. It's the only constitution in the 50 states that recognizes that New Mexico's citizenry had a dual heritage, that they at one time had also been part of the nation of Mexico, and that there were obligations owed to those people by the state of New Mexico. And this was remains, of course, part of the New Mexico Constitution. Let's go to the next slide. The state seal of New Mexico is quite interesting if you look at it. You'll notice that there is the American eagle with his wings spread wide, but look what's under his left wing. There is the Mexican eagle with the snake in its mouth, etc., obviously from the flag of Mexico. And he's under the protective wing spread of the American eagle. And this is one of the things that, again, makes New Mexico unique, is the recognition that these are people with a dual heritage. Okay. Unique among American states. I think that's a good spot for me to sign off here on the formal part of this. I just thought you might want to know, what was the population of New Mexico when it becomes a state? 330,000 people lived in New Mexico in 1912. This is according at least to the 1910 census. And at the same time, Grant County had approximately 15,000 people. So.
All right.
Thank you very much. And I am ready to listen to some comments and questions.
All right. Thank you, Doug. That was an amazing presentation. I know I learned a lot. We're going to take some questions and answers right now. You may be being contacted by Mary or Alan. If you want to come on the air and speak directly, please keep your comments short and pithy and We've got running a little low on time and got lots of people. So go ahead and take some time to talk to them and put in the chat box, the QA box, and let me know. In the meantime, Doug, our first question I will go ahead and share with you was actually sent in before the talk even began. So you have some people raring to go here. And from Eileen Kingsley, who wants to know the first election, who ran that election and who got to vote? Was it only property owners as in the original charter or territorial charter for Silver City, or what was the final vote exactly? Do you have any?
I'm assuming we're talking about the local election. Is this the Silver City?
Yes, she said the Silver City charter, so I'm guessing that's.
Yeah. Well, it's a good question. It's an interesting question because actually Silver City had hoped that it would get its charter earlier. And one of the reasons given for why the charter was not accepted 2 years earlier was because there was no provision given for the first election of city officials. And so they put in a provision and got the charter approved in 1878. To answer who ran the election, it was the county officials. The county commissioners were put in charge of scheduling the first election, and it occurred in April of 1878, and Robert Black was elected as the first mayor of Silver City. And to answer the who got to vote question, it was male property owners who got to vote in that election. And I don't have the numbers here for exactly the how many people voted and so forth, but I hope that addresses that question.
Wow, let's see, male landowners. I'd like to say that's surprising. She had one more question, which was, why did Congress reject the Arizona state proposal?
Basically, they didn't even have to give a reason because it went to committee and the committee didn't take it up. And so you can say that it was tabled. Okay, so by the time the next session of Congress rolled around, there was nobody to push the issue anymore. And so it was never brought up again. So it's one of the common procedures that is done in committees where if a bill doesn't have really strong backing from someone, oftentimes they can run out the clock, basically. So they basically could refuse to consider it without even giving a reason. Stephen?
In the early political history here, up to 1912, who would you say is the best good guy and who was the worst bad guy?
Are we talking locally, nationally?
Locally.
Locally.
Grant County. I have a couple of candidates.
You have a couple of, yeah, I'll defer to you on that.
The good guy is Jack Fleming.
Okay.
He was mayor for 15 years. He gave 20 acres to establish the normal school up on the hill.
Right. And the museum is in Fleming Hall, which was named after him.
Yes.
And by the way, that picture of the Rough Riders that was on the slide, Mayor Fleming is on the extreme left in that photo. He's posing at the depot with the Rough Riders. Yeah, but that's an excellent candidate. What about bad guys?
Bad guy is Tom Lyons, the cattle baron, who was an absolute thug.
I believe Alex Ogletree would have something to say about that. At the LC Ranch.
That's the nature of history. That's okay.
So, I have Dennis Lane would like to ask a question, speak to you. I'm going to bring him on right now. Okay. Hi, Dennis. Are you there?
Yes.
Okay.
I would like to know when Arizona and New Mexico were at one point one big territory, and it was divided, and from my understanding, 1863.
That is correct, yes.
Why was it divided, and what were the circumstances?
Well, of course, interestingly enough, as you know, that's right in the midst of the Civil War. And President Lincoln was persuaded to sign off on it primarily for administrative reasons, simply because the territory was so enormous that it was very difficult to administer. The military had a role in that as well, and it was a problem that really annoyed the Army for years, because the Apache people, of course, who were the main thorn in the side of the Army in those years, didn't recognize political boundaries like territorial boundaries or state boundaries, but the Army had districts that they drew up, and what you would find is that you had one district of the Army having to deal with a different district of the Army trying to accomplish the same military outcome. And so it was believed that by dividing the territories, you could get more seamless administration in the territories. There's always more to it than that kind of thing. And already the population of Arizona was beginning to differ quite a bit from the population of New Mexico. And so you were beginning to get people who had, let's say, a different agenda in the western part of New Mexico territory, which ultimately becomes Arizona.
Okay, thank you, Doug. Let's see, we have a statement from Jeff Bingaman. I just wanted to relay to you that said that Robert Black was the contractor who built the Almond House that we are currently in. That is interesting.
Interesting.
All right. We have a couple more questions, and I want to remind all of our viewers that are out there on Facebook to put your questions in the comments. It will be relayed to me, and we'll pass them along to our speakers. So if you have any of those questions, please go ahead and let me know. We have one. Did the Grant County secessionists expect to actually join Arizona, or were they bluffing?
I think, without being able to poll them, I think a lot of them truly believe they could make it happen. I think, and there was enough support for it in Arizona that, but whether it was partly a bluff, we have to say if it was, it worked, because the territorial legislature unanimously approved the charter for Silver City. And so either way, it certainly worked, but I think some of them were sincerely thinking they would get attached to Arizona.
Pretty good question. Patricia Kingsley has one. She wants to know about Arizona's bid to divide the New Mexico territory horizontally, not vertically, that Congress rejected, but that Grant County voted for, rather than join the Hispanics in northern New Mexico. Was that part of the reasoning behind that?
What the comment I would make on that is that, southern New Mexico was proclaimed the Confederate territory of Arizona briefly, from the time the Confederates seized control of Mesilla in 1861 up until their ejection by the California column the next year, that there already was some precedent for dividing the territory horizontally. And no doubt it had its racist implications, that northern New Mexico was certainly considered to be racially, ethnically different than southern New Mexico. And this became even more evident. There's some research that's been done, by the way, on the ethnic makeup of Grant County, and I think Stephen Fox may be dealing with some of that later in a later presentation, and
Tom Hester as well.
Very interesting. But so I don't know a whole lot about that effort to divide it horizontally. I do know that on another occasion in 1906, 6 years before statehood, there was a proposal that New Mexico and Arizona would come in as a single state that would be called Montezuma. And so we could have been in the state of Montezuma. So.
All right, guys, let's see. We have a question from Art Radcliffe, which I'm not quite understanding. So maybe we'll get back to that again. We only have a few more minutes. We're running a little short on time. So everybody, let's get your questions in. Let's get you on air. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your voices on Facebook and in the chat box. Let us know. And we'll get you on here. Let's see, we have
I should have gone over here.
Who's that? Susan? Okay, here's a question. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo has several clauses speaking to the rights and treatment of the Apache. Was that the intent? But in theory, state constitution should have reinforced that as well as recognition of Mexican rights.
The whole concept of native rights is a very convoluted subject in its own right. And what I will say is that we should always remember is that Native Americans did not receive citizenship in the United States as a group until 1924. And so any question of citizenship was essentially dominated by the national government up until that time. And so any attempts at citizenship and so forth that might have been implied by the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was really not going to have very much legal force.
All right. Thank you very much. So right now, oh, okay, here's one more. Here's the question about Rodeo. I heard that Rodeo was founded to specifically be on one side of the border and ended up on the other.
I don't know the story on that. Does anybody know?
Well, we can see if anyone in the audience knows anything about that, about Rodeo. Go ahead and put it in the chat box. Make sure to do your messages to the whole group and not just panelists. And maybe we'll get back to that if anyone knows anything. So thank you very much. It looks like we are running low or running down on questions. So I want everybody to stick around. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Get your coffee, get whatever you need. And in the meantime, we're going to get a little bit of information on some of these wonderful products behind me here, all about the state of New Mexico, from Miss Melody, and she will be joining us here shortly. Stick around. We'll be back in 5 minutes, and we will hear from Commissioner Harry Brown, as well as Representative Luis Terrazas. So please stick around. Come right back.
I don't know if they could fix it for.
Hi, and welcome to our commercial. I'm Melody, and I'm the Silver City Museum store manager, and I'm going to just throw out a few little things for you to think about to come shop for. I did hear earlier about Fort Baird, of course, and about the tuberculosis that happened there. We do have a few books that actually deal with the tuberculosis in our area, and I'd like for you to take a peek at them. Feel free to come by. They're available for purchase and pretty in-depth about the area as well. Behind me, I also have a selection of Zia products that we sell in the store. And these products are, we have t-shirts to say New Mexico on them. We also have a hat that's embroidered with our Zia symbol and New Mexico. And inside, we have a headband that will tell you about what all the Zia signs are, the 4 winds and the 4 ways of life. are all inside as well. We also have socks that have the New Mexico Zia on it. We have cups, and we also have shot glasses that are very, very popular and a fun gift to give to people that love New Mexico. Additionally, we have more books about the history of some of the topics that were given today that are available in New Mexico too. The New Mexico Stolen Lands book is particularly of interest because it is actually a new publication. It tells more about the history of what happened here in New Mexico as well. We also have a book about Silver City, a postcard book that's really awesome and tells a lot about what's happening here too. And Happen in New Mexico covers all kinds of areas and things that have happened across the state, which is kind of a fun historical book as well. And then Turmoil on the Rio Grande is another book that's the territorial history of the Mesilla Valley from 1846 to 1865. So that's a really popular book. We sell a lot of that one too. We have playing cards as well. So we have a wide range of Zia products, but we're also in the process of bringing in even more. We found a new mug that we're bringing in, a new coffee mug. We've got in a lot of decals that are coming in about New Mexico that a lot of folks like to have. That's been a real popular product and things that people are interested in using for gifts and for our tourists. Our tourists love them. That's a lot of the products that relate to our topic today as far as history and things that are related to our Zia and our state symbol. Besides all that, you can shop the store Tuesday through Friday from Tuesday through Friday from 9 to 4:30, Saturday and Sunday 10 to 4. We also have a huge selection of gift items that are earrings for women. We have jewelry, necklaces. We also have a wide range of books on mining. We have a very large selection of books on the Apaches and our region, and some gift items that relate to the Apaches as well. They're not Apache made, but they're Native American in look. We have headbands, we have necklaces, we have bracelets. We have a large selection of books on the Apache nations, lots of them. Besides all that, we have the store has expanded, and we have more products for children, more gifts and toys. We have books on women in history. We have a huge selection of books on ranching. Those are just some of the things that we have available for you too. So we invite you to come along anytime now that we're open to shop us. We give the opportunity to have your gifts gift wrapped free of charge. We also now offer gift cards that can be loaded and reused often. And those are wonderful, a wonderful gift. The other thing that's really important to keep in mind as well is that if you are a member of the Silver City Museum Society, you receive a 10% discount off of all of your sales. And that's always an awesome perk to have. And we'd love to have you be a member because being a member supports us. And without membership income, it makes it harder for us to run the museum. So everything that you donate or give to us to the museum supports us. So we thank you for considering being a member. It is a fundraising arm of the Silver City Museum Society. We ask for people to feel free to give us a call or email info@silvercitymuseum.org. there we can help you with any information about becoming a member as well. And I think that's really kind of all I need to say today about our store. I think that's going to wrap it up for right now. And I'll turn it back to Erin. She's going to be here to take you to the next stage of our program today. So thank you for letting me share some things about our store. And we hope to see you soon shopping. Thank you very much.
All right, guys. If you will introduce yourselves. And guys in the, can my scholars, I think you are muted. Can one of you reach over to the computer screen and click unmute on yourselves? All right. So it's great to have you two with us today. And I have some, so did you learn anything interesting?
A lot. Yeah.
A lot?
Took me back to New Mexico State University when I had the option of either taking U.S. history or New Mexico history. I said, New Mexico history will be small. It'll be something I can manage. I was very mistaken and I learned a lot. And I don't think I've probably forgotten 3/4 of what I learned. Dr. Dinwiddie did a wonderful job. I hadn't heard stuff like that in such a long time. It was great to hear that. It was just neat. Thank you, Doctor, if you can hear me.
I can hear you, and thank you very much.
Oh, that was wonderful.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I had a couple of themes I wanted to talk about, but Representative Terrazas, if you had more you wanted to say, I think you should go first.
Go ahead, sir. No, go ahead.
I thought it was fascinating, both that the concept of nationhood and the question of federalism played so large in the presentation. To me, these things prove the error of Henry Ford's thinking in the quote that you gave us, Dr. Dinwiddie, that history is bunk. We are still grappling with these questions, right? What is a nation? A pretty new concept back when your history started. People were still wondering what it was. I think it was still foreign to a lot of folks, like that gentleman from Indiana you mentioned, that a nation could be something different than a group defined by race or ethnicity. And that's why there's so much racial issues and frankly racism in the history you described. So obviously this country, I think, has led the way worldwide in at least ideologically declaring that a nation is all the people who live within a geographic area, not just certain groups. But that as a statement is something we have failed to live up to time and time again, and we're still failing to live up to it. And that's why we still have so much division across the nation. Division about the question of immigration, division about the question of citizenship. All those things are still extremely relevant on the national level. And your presentation made super clear how relevant they were to our own local history. So I thought that was fascinating. And then the question of federalism, right? The question of to what extent should the national government be setting rules? To what extent should state or territorial governments set rules? And to what extent should you leave it open to the local governments? All of these things are questions of balance and questions of what works best for the people that end up being defined as the members of the nation. It's a balance between uniformity and between local control and local innovation. And uniformity can be really helpful, right? Minimum wage laws don't do much good if the next county over doesn't follow the same law. Air pollution laws don't do much good because the air just keeps flowing from one jurisdiction to another. On the other hand, you don't want to stifle local innovation. And if some states or some counties come up with a better way of doing something, we should invite that and we should all learn from those examples. So there's that constant balance. And I love the story of the local charter, Silver City. I think at this point, it's been largely rendered toothless. I know that my council member, Joe Ray, has brought up on a number of occasions the fact that we could still run brothels and casinos if we wanted to under that charter. I don't think it's going to happen because it's a lot that's no longer relevant, even if it's still on paper. So I loved both of those aspects of your presentation, Dr. Dinwiddie. Thank you very much for making that happen.
Well, thank you. I would just like to make one comment. I taught a lot of government classes as well as history classes, and the term politics has such a negative connotation to most people that one of the first things you need to grapple with is what does it mean? What do politics mean? And of course, it derives from the ancient Greek city-states of the polis, the affairs of the city, politics. And politics are defined a lot of different ways. I think my favorite definition is politics are the art of accomplishment. And the government is actually the vehicle through which those accomplishments are achieved.
Nice.
I'd like to comment on that. I think it's wonderful. I think our Commissioner Brown said something that was very relevant to me, something that's always been important to me, and that is balance. I think he said that right. We have a lot of confusion. I think as far as a new legislator, freshman, I get questions all the time on our role in certain aspects of government that really I have no say so on. And I think Dr. Dinwiddie was sitting there and described that in how government is actually broke down from federal, state, county, city, and municipal, whatever. And so those are so important because there's so much confusion. And you know, I'm a person that loves people. I enjoy people, and through my profession, I've seen a lot of controversy in the room when we're making arrangements because there's differences in opinions of what should or shouldn't happen, or differences in religion and so forth. And so, but I've been blessed to be able to have conversations with people and try to find what the commissioner said, which was balance. Balance is so important. We have to recognize that. I think the commissioner brought up a few of the things that are relevant to our country, but I also feel that we all, as a community, as a country, as a state, as constituent, well, as residents of New Mexico, believe in a lot of the same things, and I really mean that I would like to see us concentrate more on the 90% of what we do agree on, and try to kind of bring the 10% that we don't, sort of kind of compromise and work together. One of the things I did, and I don't want to go on and on, I'm just going to say a couple things because I want you to pitch in and tell me what you want. But I think what was missing, I can tell you, the legislature this time, of course, is my outside of being there as a part, you know, in participating and just being there. This was the first, you know, this was my first time being in the legislature, and it was difficult. I think through the restrictions and stuff, to have the conversations with our constituents, with other legislators. And I think that was difficult because we weren't able to sit down together and have real conversations and understand each other, where we're all coming from. It was very segregated, not for any other reason than the restrictions that we were under. And so I hope we never go through something like that again, because it was terrible. Couldn't even get a sandwich at the lounge. I couldn't even sit in the lounge, and you know, and I had a couple people go up there, and I would have to leave the building, go outside of the fence and see them. So that was difficult, but I really appreciated that the commissioner brought up the word balance. So important. All right. With that, I'll see what you want to, where you want to take this, Aaron.
Yes, it is. If anyone out there would like to come on the air, I want to remind you to let us know, and please do that. We have a question. Someone wants to know if we should be worried that the mine and mining company has an unbalanced impact on local politics and government.
Hmm.
That's a deep one.
No, I don't touch that.
Take a stab.
Well, I'm just going to say this. Look, one of the things we did here in the presentation here, and I don't know if I'm addressing Aaron or just all of the people there. Mining's been a part of our community. It was evident in the presentation that Dr. Dinwiddie gave us. It's been a part of this culture. It's even a part of our culture. I mean, my grandfather, who was a World War II Purple Heart, worked at the mine. My father worked at the mine. Uncles, cousins, friends, you name it. We're all connected to that in some way, fashion, or another. And but if your question is, do they have a stronghold on how things work? I don't see that directly. I mean, do they share the things that they're interested or concerned with? They do, but we also I get a lot of questions from your average person that's out there just trying to live their life and works at the mine, and they have children in school, and they're just like everybody else. They're trying to get their kids in college and have a mortgage and a car payment, and they're concerned about their jobs. And so we have to keep all that in mind and keep balance to the best of our ability.
Like we were saying, like you were saying earlier, 90%. 90%. We're all just people trying to live our best lives and to do our best for our neighbors and our community. And I appreciate that response. Stephen Fox, Dr. Fox, can you hear me?
Yes.
Aaron,
Dr. Fox is
Aaron,
going.
can I take a stab?
Sorry.
At this?
Go on, Harry.
I just wanted to say a brief answer to that last question, if I might.
Of course.
Okay. I don't think that the issue is just our mine. I think we should be concerned about money in politics, right? Money has distorted what I think the purpose of democratic politics is. And we haven't figured out as a society how to deal with that, right? We've had lots of attempted reforms, and we still have the problem. The Supreme Court doesn't seem to agree with me, right? They said there should be more money in politics when they ruled on Citizens United. I think that's the wrong direction to go in. We should have, one person, one vote, not $1, one vote. So I don't think it's peculiar to our mines. And I don't therefore resent the mines for using the power that their money gives them. I think they're doing what they should be doing, which is looking out for their shareholders. And that's just to be expected. While acknowledging that they have a lot of money, and especially on the state level, they wield quite a lot of power, I think it's worth noting that locally, historically, they haven't necessarily, right? They were forced to integrate. They were forced to accept unions for quite a while until they won that battle. And most recently, they've run some candidates who didn't win. So it's not like they have a monopoly. I wouldn't go that far. But they do have power to reduce their taxes, I believe. They've used political power for that purpose. And they have power to influence other issues that they weigh in on. But again, I don't think they're acting irresponsibly by trying to use that power. So I'm worried about the big issue, money in politics. I'm not really worried about the specific issue of our minds.
Good.
I
think I'd like to, if you guys don't mind, just to keep in mind, I'd like to keep this discussion away from focusing too much on specific policies or specific politics. And let's talk about, maybe money in politics or just the role of government itself and how it functions in our state. I think what are some of the biggest misconceptions that you think that people have out there in the public about the difference between the functionality of government on either the local or the state levels? I'm sure that you hear everything.
They get called on all kinds of stuff, Aaron. I got called the other day because somebody was driving too fast. And so, one of the beautiful things that I'm going to say about the New Mexico legislature is that we're volunteers. I think people don't realize that, we volunteer our time. We don't get paid for it. And I'm not whining about that. I just want people to understand that all your legislators there that are serving are not being paid, and they're doing this. I wanted to do this simply because I was born and raised here in this little town. And I know a lot of people. I have good relationships with people. And this community has supported me all throughout my life. And I thought, you know what? Told my wife, I want to give something back. I always have contributed financially to support all kinds of things in our community. But I said, maybe I should give some of my time and try that and see if I can help our community. And so the question that you ask, it's so funny because I never thought I'd be called about someone's driving too fast, Luis. And hey, Luis, what are you going to do about the border? Or what are you going to do? There are things that are outside of our role in the capacity of what we do. And I think this is such a good idea, Aaron, because it gives us an ability to express and tell each other what is missing. And a lot of it is, and I'll be honest, I mean, I'm learning myself. So I've learned a lot. I mean, if you think you know, believe me, you don't know until you get in there, and you're still learning, and you're learning, and you're learning. So your average person, I think I can tell you, I was in some committees, and I don't want to make this political, but I can tell you sometimes some of the bills that would come across in committee, and it made me laugh when the doctor said, committee is a place where ideas die. And I thought, oh my gosh, he hit the nail on the head. And we would have conversations, and sometimes you have to read real deep. Remember, the title, most people don't get past the title. They might do a quick little summary, but when you get deep in there, you can see the differences of what the title is and what's going on. And sometimes it was misconceived to the people of what they thought they were getting. And at least when I was there during committee, I would make sure, hey, I want to bring up this point that, remember, this is only this. It's a study. It's not actually a bill that's going to do something. And that, I think, is important, because that's where people get frustrated. Yeah. They're thinking one thing and they're getting another. And so clarity and transparency is so important.
Yeah. Speaking of clarity and transparency, there is a neat feature of Zoom here called a poll. And we've all seen polls, but on this poll, we can ask the audience for their opinion on something. And I'm going to launch a poll right now that asks if anyone has learned anything from today's program that changes the way that they view local or state politics. So everybody out there, let us know. You can do it anonymously. And while that's going on, I have a question from Art Radcliffe, who would like to know which jurisdiction would have any jurisdiction over a proposed mine in the Gila National Forest in Gold Gulch, federal, county, city, or state.
And Aaron, I invited Mr. Ratcliffe to write me. That's a long answer.
Okay, I understand. Did you want to address that, Louis, or?
You know what? I was trying to answer the survey and I didn't quite catch the whole question. And it wouldn't let me do it, so I'm sorry.
It wouldn't let you? Oh, well,
I would agree with
we don't count
the little portion that I did here. I think that is probably a pretty good long answer. Yes.
Okay. And we have a comment from one of our future speakers, who will be Jim Smith next week. We'll be talking about the legend and mythos of Billy the Kid and the whole Old West mythos, and how that affects we'll get into a nice conversation with Patrick Hotchkiss from the Visitor Center, and we'll see how the Old West thing plays into our tourism and economy and all that different stuff. And well, that's a different conversation. For right now, Jim Smith would like to point out that in Greece, the word for not interested in politics is actually the same as idiot. And I had one of our friends at Will actually verified this and did a little fact checking. So in this political conversation, I have our friends from the Western Institute at Lifelong Learning doing some fact checking here in the background. And yes, it means idiot.
It doesn't win you a lot of votes to make that argument out on the campaign trail.
That's why I'm making it and you're not.
I'm just going to smile.
Apparently
That's
just a
it.
fact from Jim Smith and a funny little factoid.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
All right, so far, 33% of our audience says that they did learn something that changes the way that they view local or state politics, and 67% says no. I know that there are more of you out there. I know more of you have learned things. Oh, okay, Jim has corrected me. I was wrong. It's not somebody who is, okay. The word idiot was used to refer to someone not interested in the community, the body politic, not politics itself. Okay, all right. So here's some other, so you had talked about the territorial charter being, the city charter being somewhat toothless. So alas, there will be no casinos in our 2-mile radius down here. But along with that, do you feel like the state territorial charter or any of that still has any influence in the way government has grown?
Do you mean this?
Or what about the Guadalupe Hidalgo?
Okay, so let me try to get clarity on the question.
right.
Are we talking about what influence does the treaty have on local government or government today? Is that the question?
Yes, first I was going for the territorial charter, and then I thought we'd try for the treaty and see how that panned out.
And on government today?
Yes.
Well, yes, certainly. I mean, the charter certainly set the boundaries, and that's a lot about what constitutions do. Constitutions, charters, they set the boundaries for action, and then everything that is done subsequent to the adoption of those things, you have to check and see, do they fit within those boundaries? So in terms of laying a foundation for future decision making, they're essential. As far as the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, we could do an entire session just on the treaty. So it's very difficult to make blanket statements about it. But what I will say is that there were sections of the treaty that were agreed to by the negotiators, which were then abrogated by Congress as part of the Compromise of 1850. Keep in mind that the Constitution of the United States grants the Senate the say-so over treaties. Treaties do not become official until the Senate approves them. So as a result, the Senate could edit the treaty down to something that it would approve. And so that's what happened with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. There were several sections which did even more for citizens of New Mexico. For example, in terms of the land grants. The land grants would have had a great deal more protection had the original treaty been ratified, but it was not. They cut out those sections. It also prevented New Mexico from immediately becoming a state because the original treaty suggested that New Mexico should become a state immediately. And the Congress changed that, the Senate changed it and inserted wording that when the Congress believes it is appropriate, it will become a state. So those are just two examples of how the treaty, the part that I referred to, of course, that was picked up and included in the state constitution is very important, but it's also important for us to understand that there were lots of parts of the treaty that did not become officially accepted.
Question for Dr. Dinwiddie. I was in New Orleans, and I took one of those tours where they kind of walk you around and so forth. And you know, I got off, and someone told me that sometimes their information isn't totally accurate. But is that where the Louisiana Purchase was actually signed? Was it in New Orleans, Dr. Dinwiddie?
I believe that I believe there was a role for the city in that. I'm sorry, I don't remember the details, but it very well could have been. Remember that when Jefferson agreed to the Louisiana Purchase, he did it without consulting Congress. And so he kind of had to fudge a little bit there.
A little bit.
And on the other hand, you remember that they said, well, what did you buy? And he said, well, I'm going to send Lewis and Clark out and figure out what we just bought. So long answer, but anyway, interesting story. So.
And I'm asking you this because I think that's so interesting what we're talking about. And the gentleman who was taking us around said that the U.S. government had borrowed the money from England, and let me see here, to buy it from France. Does that sound right? And
yeah, they bought it specifically. They bought it from Napoleon.
Right, and Napoleon used that money.
Wars.
And then Napoleon used those funds, which came from England, or to wage war against them. Is that correct?
I'm a little hesitant to say that they got the money from Britain. I don't recall that.
Well, no, we borrowed the money from them to purchase it, and then turn around and paid it to them, and then apparently, then Napoleon used that money to fund his war. That's what
I would not agree to that right away. I would have to look into that.
I was trying to clarify one of these little deals, but anyway.
Yeah.
Scott, do you have anything, any input on that?
Yeah.
Well, I just know that we paid $15 million for the Louisiana Territory. And I'd have to also research and see if there was a loan that we acquired from Great Britain. It would seem to me that if we did acquire a loan from Great Britain, we ultimately paid that back. So that just says to me that we still purchased the Louisiana Territory in the long run.
Yeah, I guess what my question was, did we borrow the money from them to pay Napoleon for that property, and then Napoleon used those funds to wage his war against Great Britain again, or England? That was just, anyway, it was just something that was brought up in that thing, and it's always the office where they said it was signed was something I thought, man, I've never had anybody I haven't been able to ask anybody to confirm that, and I thought this was a perfect opportunity. Dr. Dinwiddie was so articulate and everything. I said that he's my man. He's going to answer my question. But
well, there's one more footnote to that whole story, and that was Napoleon really wasn't going to sell Louisiana. In fact, he had sent troops that were supposed to crush the rebellion in Haiti, and then they were going to move on to New Orleans and establish a major French military post in New Orleans. But in Haiti, they caught yellow fever and got wiped out. And so he didn't have an army anymore. So he decided to make the best of a bad situation and just sell it.
Thank you for that.
Anybody else? Okay, I want to remind everybody, all of our audience members out there, comment on Facebook, come on air, put your comment in the chat box. We're having a good conversation here. We've got all of our scholars sitting here. It's not quite, doesn't quite look like a lineup, but I promise you, these are good, upstanding people. See?
I'm going to make a little comment about some of the program. I thought it was interesting to hear that even back then, they didn't think Santa Fe was listening to them.
Oh, yeah.
I hear that all the time. I said, I still hear that today. So it looks like, I don't know that it's a circle. I think we're just kind of in this whirlpool, and and we've never gotten out of it. And I think that's sad that over that period of time, we haven't found a way to communicate and listen to the people throughout our state, especially Grant County. You hear that, and I thought that was it. I think we're hearing it, and it's redefined, I would say, today as the debate between rural New Mexico and urban New Mexico's needs, and how the legislature plays a part in making legislation that affects that doesn't quite fit that properly. And I think
Representative Terrazas, I would just comment that if you talk to people from every state, almost all of them will say that what you name the state capital, they don't listen to our concerns down here in Podunk. So comes with the territory, I think.
Dr. Dinwiddie, I'll go back to the committee, the committee idea killer that you described, and I don't want to make this political, but I remember bringing up some things because I don't. So I want you to know that for me, not everything's politics. I just don't. To me, it's about people, and it's not about party. It's not about what's. To tell you the truth, I hardly even watch the news anymore because it just bang your head when you walk out the door. It's just so disappointing sometimes to hear the divide of people, and that I want unity is my goal, is to try to unify our community, and that takes a lot of work from all of us that have been elected. Our newspaper, those who are expressing the information. I think it's important that we all have a moral responsibility, a responsibility to our neighbor and to all of us to stop for a minute and listen. Because I can tell you, that was one of the things that I was most disappointed. There were things that when I would sit in committee, I'm digesting this stuff to see what we need to do. Even if we don't agree with the legislation, we should always do our best to clean it up and support it in a way of fashioning it where it's a good, clean bill to the best of our ability. And
oh, I'm sorry.
What was that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I thought.
No.
Ask your question.
I think we all have to stop for a minute, and I mean everyone, and take a deep breath. And boy, like I said earlier, if we could just concentrate on the 90% of what we agree on, we sure would get a lot further. We get stuck and trip over that 10%, and it takes away a lot of our efforts of what we could agree on and what we could really do with our communities in our state. And just take a minute and sometimes stop and just listen. I think that's important.
I agree. I think a lot of us do. And that's something that we here at the Silver City Museum and all of our friends and partners are trying to get to be a place where that can foster a sense of community and conversation, and to where people from every walk of life and every sector and every possible group can come and feel like this is a place of their own. This is a place where we want to hear everyone's voices, where everyone can be heard in a polite, civil and scholarly ways. And this whole conversation with you guys, I think, has gone a long way towards that, and very much appreciated. And I hope that we can continue doing this. We have 6 more of these programs in the series throughout the course of the summer, and we're getting up on the hour now, so I don't want to keep people too much longer. But I just want to do a few things and call out that our poll has come in. It is 50-50. Half of the people out there, something has changed the way that they view state or local politics. So you know what? I think that's a pretty darn good thing. Unless it was great and now but it's probably a really good thing.
Aaron, I do have a complaint. And the complaint is the picture you put on there compared to what they're seeing today on the screen of me was my original picture. They needed a picture of me and I'm just trying to make light of things because I wanted to smile. I was going to call you and say, hey, you need to change that picture. I had to put a picture in right away, and it was one of those from the cruises, and they sure do make you look a lot younger and stuff. And I told Mandy, oh my gosh, they're going to see me with a beard. I've never had a beard. It was the first time ever in the last month. I've never gone more than 2 days without shaving. And I said, they're gonna that picture that they see on your little Facebook deal, and who they're gonna see today, they're gonna go, who is that guy? You don't look anything like that. But I'll tell you this: if you want to get a good picture, get it on a cruise liner. They make you look thin and young, and I don't know what they have awesome cameras. So anyway, I just wanted to tease you. I saw your facial expression change. I got a complaint. You're like, what? I just wanted to make you smile. It was just funny. I told Maddie, oh boy, I need another glamour shot out there at the on a cruise liner as soon as they open
it's
up.
Distinguished.
There you go. Well, I did it to see where all the white hair is, to see what the legislature did to me, and see how it went. And I appreciate Commissioner Brown coming out. I think he's, I think all of us have to have these nice conversations. I did have a really good conversation. I had some conversations where, Senator Hemphill is on one side, obviously, of the House, and so on, and I'm on the other, and we're on different schedules and we're running, but we see each other in the halls, and we got to work on some things to bring our county some good capital outlay. We worked together. It was nice. It was, sometimes people think that we get up there and we're just trying to beat each other up. I'm not like that. We listened to each other. We all sat down at a table, and some of us on Zoom, and we all kind of just worked together to make sure that we leveraged every single dollar, made sure that two of us weren't giving you funding the same thing and we lose one of our funding. In other words, there was a project, we didn't both want to fund it, and then part of our money gets vetoed. So I think we were very successful in bringing and working together and bringing our county some good funding that was needed. But I will tell you, it was funny. I had about $30 million of request, and I had $1.3 million to make that happen. And I'm pretty good at stretching money, but as a businessman, you have to know how to take care of your money and make sure it lasts and stretch it. But
cooperation is best. And Harry, you just muted yourself. Don't do that. Come back.
There are people coming in and out, so there'll be some background noise. But really, I just want to thank you, Aaron, for putting this together.
Before you go, one last question. So what do you think is the best thing about government in our corner of the world?
Harry, I've been talking a lot. You take that, Commissioner, and then I'll go after you.
I don't know if I could say in such a general way. The best thing about my experience in government in our corner of the world has been very much along the lines of what Luis has been saying, that people with very different perspectives realize that we all live in the same little community and we all see each other, daily or weekly. And so it's very different than campaigning or politicking on a bigger scale where the personal is removed. Right here, we all get along. And that's super nice. So that I think has been the biggest surprise and possibly the biggest pleasure. We're actually able to talk about issues and sometimes even come to consensus
Well put.
on a number of issues. So I've been pleasantly surprised in my less than 5 years on the commission.
Louis, we have 1 more minute.
Okay, well, I was going to tell you, I think what's neat is, or what people need, this is from my perspective, I think people just want to know what's going on. They, you know, we go up there to the state capitol and even Commissioner Brown, they go to their meetings. People are working, people are busy. People don't know what we're doing there, and they trust that what we're going to do is what we say and reflect our community's representation. And I hope to always be, you know, as transparent. I'm going to be transparent, but I hope that's enough for people, because I think knowledge of knowing what we're up there doing, what we're challenged with, I think if you were standing or sitting next to us, I think you would get a little more sense of what is going on. And I can just truly tell you that any decision that I make is wholeheartedly from my heart. And I mean, I think it out, but I do it from my heart, because I feel that people come first.
Okay.
And so I will always do everything I can to support our community. We have a beautiful, beautiful town. God bless you.
Yes, we do. Thank you. Anything from our scholars? Would you like to say anything before you go? No? Okay, I want to remind everybody to, if you have any further questions about anything, and we are out of time for today, you can email me at education@silvercitymuseum.org. I will forward it along to the appropriate parties. I want to say thank you for everyone that joined us here today, for Dr. Dinwiddie, Bart, who we heard from earlier, our live studio audience. Woo!
Thank you
Okay, I know
for
it's
having
been 2
us.
hours, guys, but come on, give me something.
It was great. Thank you very much. Yeah, appreciate you having us here and everyone who participated. God bless you.
Oh, one last question.
Yes, ma'am.
I saw in one of my brief look at the chat box earlier, I saw there was a Jeff Bingaman. Was that Senator Jeff Bingaman?
I guess.
Really?
Jeff Bingaman,
You probably saw me try to ask him, but he didn't reply to
answer?
confirm. But I agree, it almost surely had to be, right?
I mean, maybe there's other ones, but I wish that he had been here for this part. But the good thing is that all of this was recorded. A lot of the information that comes from these talks is going to be taken, and maybe some things that we want to look into more, and for our future exhibits that we are working on. And these will be recorded. They will be available online, and people that attended will receive a link. So we'll make sure he sees you. We'll make sure.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you.
And register for next week for Billy the Kid.